You've been waiting, praying, sowing tears in the midnight hour, and nothing seems to shift. The doors you've knocked on still closed, the promises you journaled still hanging in the unseen. And if you're honest, there are moments where the silence of God sounds louder than any no you feared. But let me tell you something. You were never forgotten. You were being preserved. Because there is something about divine timing that our impatient hearts wrestle with. We think it's denial, but it's really a detour of grace. We think it's abandonment, but it's actually protection in disguise. See, there are places you wanted to run to, people you were willing to compromise for, stages you were desperate to stand on. But your spirit wasn't ready. Your identity wasn't rooted yet. Your discernment was still developing. You were asking for the promise, but he was still building the person. Because what good is a blessing that buries you? What good is an opportunity if it exposes your unhealed wounds? What good is visibility if you haven't yet learned to see yourself through his eyes? There is a version of you, the one that's whole, wise, refined by fire and faithful in obscurity. That is being shaped in the shadows. And when you feel hidden, you're actually being held. Held in a space where your confidence isn't built by applause, but by his presence. You thought the silence meant delay, but it was development. The room you've been asking for, he's been preparing you for it. So when you enter, you don't just survive it, you steward it. He didn't say a no. He said, not like this, not rushed, not broken, not distracted. Not with pieces of you scattered in relationships that drained you. Not with your worth hanging on outcomes, but whole, bold, clear, anchored. So take heart. It's not late. It's not forgotten. It's fortified. And the time you thought was wasted, he was weaving wisdom into your waiting. Because what he's building in you isn't just for the breakthrough. It's for the becoming days we often misinterpret delay as rejection. When something doesn't happen in the time frame we expect, our minds begin to wander into doubt, into discouragement, to the silent whispers, maybe we weren't chosen after all. Maybe that word we heard was just emotion. Maybe that dream wasn't real. Maybe we misheard. But what if the delay is not a denial? What if it's a barrier of love? What if it's a shelter built by the hands of God himself to protect you from walking into something that your current identity cannot yet sustain? There's a version of you that is asking, reaching, yearning for what you've seen in your spirit. But God sees beyond your desire. He sees your capacity. He sees your triggers, the places in your soul that are still bleeding from old wounds. He sees the insecurities that still cause you to shrink when pressure comes. He sees the approval you still seek from people who were never meant to define your worth. And he knows that while your hands are ready to receive, your heart is still under construction. There's something about divine timing that does not consult human impatience. It doesn't align itself with your calendar or your countdowns. God is not slow. He is exact. But his timing is not a response to your desperation. It's a response to your development. Because purpose isn't a performance. It's a posture. And you can't posture yourself for purpose if your identity is still wrapped in survival. Sometimes we ask God for things that our present selves would mishandle. The job that looks like a blessing might be the very thing that reawakens the pride you buried. The relationship that seems like an answered prayer might become the idol that distracts you from intimacy. The platform you're praying for could amplify your voice before your character is grounded enough to carry the weight of influence. So God in his mercy pauses, not because he is withholding, but because he is protecting. We live in a world that celebrates speed, visibility, and access. But God works in the unseen. He cultivates in quietness. He matures you in the mundane. He chisels your character in the places where no one is watching. And while it feels like the world is passing you by, heaven is applauding your hiddenness. Because the person who is becoming whole in the shadows will have the strength to sustain what others crumble under in the spotlight. The delay becomes a holy classroom. It becomes the place where God reveals who you really are, not based on performance, but based on presence. It's the season where he strips away the layers of identity you built around your pain. He confronts the lies you agreed with when you were younger. He untangles you from the false labels, the cycles of striving, the need to earn love. And it hurts, it confuses, it stretches, but it transforms. You are not waiting because you're forgotten. You are waiting because God is intentional. He's not trying to frustrate you, He is forming you. He is removing the fear that you've normalized. He is refining the gifts you've buried under comparison. He is sharpening your discernment so that when the door does open, you know what to embrace and what to walk away from. You're not just being delayed, you're being fortified. You're not just being postponed, you're being prepared. And sometimes preparation feels like loss. It feels like things are falling apart, like people are walking away, like opportunities are slipping through your fingers. But in the kingdom, subtraction is often the beginning of addition. God subtracts what's unstable to add what's unshakable. He prunes what is overgrown so the fruit can actually remain. He removes what flatters your ego to make space for what feeds your soul. And all of this, every pause, every closed door, every long night is an act of mercy. When we look at delay through the lens of fear, we assume rejection. But when we look at it through the eyes of faith, we recognize divine protection. We see a Father who isn't punishing us, but who loves us enough to protect us from walking into a destiny that our unhealed identity would sabotage. We begin to see that the delay wasn't punishment, it was provision. It wasn't because we weren't ready to move. It was because we weren't ready to last. Because what God wants to build in you is not a moment of breakthrough. It's a lifestyle of sustained purpose. So even though the silence is loud, even though it seems like others are running ahead while you're still stuck at the start line, even though you feel overlooked and unseen, trust that the delay is filled with divine intention. Trust that what looks like stillness is actually movement in a dimension you cannot yet perceive. Trust that your name is still written in the plan. And trust that your delay is not random. It's God's way of making sure you don't step into your next season with an identity that's still shaped by the pain of your last one. There's a sacred beauty in being hidden that our hurried souls often miss. In a world that pushes us to be seen, to be known, to be celebrated, we forget that God often chooses obscurity as His workshop. He hides not to hurt, but to heal. He conceals not to confuse, but to restore. When you feel invisible, when your name is not called, when your efforts seem unnoticed and your gifts unrewarded, it's easy to think you've been overlooked. But heaven sees things differently. Being hidden is not punishment, it's preservation. God is not withholding you from the world. He's preparing the world for the weight of who you're becoming. Healing rarely happens in the spotlight. It requires a stillness, a quiet, a safe place where the noise of comparison, expectation, and judgment is silenced. When God hides you, it's because He's pulling you away from the counterfeit voices that have tried to name you. He's drawing you closer to His own voice, the one that speaks not just to what you do, but to who you are. And who you are is too valuable to be exposed before you are whole. Too sacred to be displayed before you are stable. Too powerful to be mishandled by people who only see the surface. Sometimes God doesn't open the door, not because you lack talent or potential, but because He loves you too much to let your wounds bleed on a platform. There are parts of you He wants to touch before the world sees your gift. There are lies you've believed that He wants to uproot. There are habits you've normalized that He wants to break. He's not hiding you to punish you. He's hiding you to restore what was broken before you even realized it was broken. The parts of your story you've buried deep, the shame you've masked with performance, the fears you've dressed up as ambition. He sees it all, and He's gently pulling you aside so He can deal with it in love. The hiding seasons are where intimacy is cultivated. They're the seasons where God doesn't just speak to you through others. He begins to speak to you directly. It's where your dependency shifts from affirmation to revelation, where your confidence stops depending on compliments and starts being rooted in communion. It's in the hidden place that you begin to know God as more than a distant rescuer. You come to know Him as a present healer, a personal guide, a loving Father who sees you fully and chooses still. When God hides you, He's not just covering you. He's covering what He's building inside of you. Because growth that's exposed too soon can be destroyed too quickly. Some plants die not because they're weak, but because they were brought into the sun before their roots were deep enough to handle the light. In the same way, God is deepening your roots. He's teaching you how to draw from Him in the dry places. He's anchoring you in truth so that when the winds of life come, and they will, you won't be moved by what changes around you because you're grounded in what's been built within you. This season of hiddenness may feel like silence, but it's filled with conversation. Heaven is speaking, heaven is aligning, heaven is shaping, and in the stillness, God is correcting your vision. He's helping you see yourself not through the lens of rejection, not through the opinions of those who couldn't handle your depth, not through the filters of insecurity, but through the clarity of His love. Because before He sends you to the world, He wants to make sure you no longer question your worth when the world doesn't applaud. He wants to make sure your value is no longer up for negotiation based on outcomes. Sometimes the hiding feels lonely. It feels like isolation. But solitude and isolation are not the same. Isolation is being cut off, but solitude is being drawn in. You're not being removed. You're being pulled closer into the kind of intimacy that can be faked, into the kind of healing that can be rushed, into the kind of love that doesn't change based on your performance. And it's in that space, in the sacred solitude, that you start to discover that you are already enough. Not because of what you can do, but because of who He is in you. The pain of being hidden will tempt you to expose yourself prematurely, to take shortcuts, to prove something, to seek visibility for validation. But visibility is not the goal, wholeness is. God is more interested in your health than your hype. He's more invested in your becoming than your branding. And when the time is right, when the healing has done its work, when the roots are deep enough, He will call your name. Not so the world can be impressed, but so they can encounter the version of you that's been refined by fire and shaped by grace. There is a version of you that exists in the mind of God, a version that has not yet been revealed to you fully, but it's the one He's always been nurturing behind every delay, behind every closed door, behind every season that felt like silence. The promise you've been holding on to is real. It's just that the version of you standing today is not yet ready to carry the weight of it. And it's not because you're not worthy. It's because becoming is a process, and purpose demands a level of transformation that can't be microwaved. You've been asking for the promise, but what you're really asking for requires you to become someone stronger, someone more rooted, someone more refined. So God doesn't just give you the blessing, you become the person who can hold it. You become the one who can walk in it without losing your identity. Because many people receive what they've prayed for only to sabotage it, because their inner world was never prepared for the pressure it brings. It's not just about having the promise, it's about becoming the person who can protect it, who can steward it with wisdom, who can withstand the testing that often comes with increase. You can't fast-track becoming. It's carved through obedience, shaped through trials, and tested in the places where no one else sees. There are things you think you're ready for because your desire is mature, but God sees that your character is still catching up. Your heart might be willing, but your mindset is still tied to patterns that cannot follow you into the future He's called you to. That version of you, the one who walks in discernment, who has authority over insecurity, who knows how to say no when necessary, who doesn't shrink in the face of opposition, that version is being formed right now in the wilderness. That version is forged in the hidden seasons where God doesn't just change your surroundings, He changes your perspective. Sometimes we ask God to change the situation, but He's using the situation to change us. Because what we're asking for isn't just a new chapter, it's a new identity. It's a shedding of what was familiar. It's a confrontation with every fear that's been hidden beneath the surface. It's a letting go of the voices that shaped you wrongly. And becoming that new version requires surrender. It requires you to let go of who you thought you had to be to survive and step into who you're meant to be to thrive. That's not an easy transition. It's not a comfortable journey, but it's a necessary one. And in that becoming, there is discomfort. There is a death of the former. The version of you that used to please people to feel worthy, that person can't follow you where you're going. The version of you that needed constant validation to feel secure, that has to break up. The version of you that performed for love, that negotiate your boundaries, that mistook striving for success, God is peeling all of that away. Because what He has for you is holy. And holy things can't be handled with unhealed hands. So when the door doesn't open when you expected it, it's not that you're being denied, it's that you're still being designed. You are becoming the kind of person who doesn't just enter the promise, but reflects the nature of God within it. Because there's a difference between stepping into a blessing and becoming a blessing. God isn't just preparing you for something great. He's making you into someone who carries greatness with grace, who doesn't compromise under pressure, who walks in rooms without needing to be affirmed by them, who carries peace in chaos, who leads with humility because they know what it took to get here. Becoming is never about perfection. It's about alignment. It's about learning to respond differently, to trust even when there's no evidence yet, to obey even when it costs you something, to keep walking even when the road makes no sense, to pray even when the answers don't come. Because every time you respond differently, every time you choose growth over comfort, every time you let go of something that once defined you, you step closer to that version of you God always had in mind. And that version is not fragile. That version is not confused about who they are. That version is not afraid to walk away from what no longer serves the call. But you can't become that person in theory. You become it in the stretch, in the wrestle, in the quiet place where no one is applauding you, in the choices you make when no one is watching. In the days when you feel like giving up but choose to remain faithful anyway. That's where identity is solidified. That's where your spiritual muscles are built. That's where your discernment is sharpened. Because God is not just developing you for a moment. He's shaping you for a mantle. Whoa. And mantles require maturity. They require submission. They require vision that goes beyond self. The version of you that's able to carry the promise doesn't emerge when everything is perfect. It emerges in the fire. It comes forth when you've learned to trust God even when He's silent. When you've let Him strip you of every false foundation. When you've allowed Him to rewrite the story you've been telling yourself. And it's in that refining, in that pressing, that the version of you who can carry purpose with integrity begins to rise. There are seasons in your life that feel like complete contradiction. Moments where your prayers are fervent, your faith is active, and yet everything around you seems to be falling apart. What once felt stable begins to shake. The relationships you counted on begin to shift. The opportunities you worked so hard for start slipping through your fingers. And your first instinct is to panic, to question, to assume that something must be wrong. But not every collapse is a crisis. Sometimes what feels like life unraveling is actually God clearing the ground for something stronger to be built. We think progress always looks like addition. More open doors, more influence, more clarity. But in God's economy, progress often looks like subtraction. It looks like pruning. It looks like the removal of things that were never meant to be permanent fixtures in your story. When God begins to move in your life, He doesn't just build, He deconstructs. He begins to shake anything that isn't rooted in Him, not to punish you, but to protect the integrity of what He's building in you. Because there are structures, patterns, habits, and mindsets that can't support the weight of where you're going. You've been asking for the promise, but the foundation is still being reinforced. You've been praying for the next level, but the scaffolding of your soul is still under construction. And when things start falling apart, when what used to make sense begins to dissolve, it's easy to assume God is absent. But He's closer than ever. He's the one doing the shaking. Because He knows that if He gave you what you asked for too soon, it would rest on unstable ground. And anything built on what is unstable is a threat to your future. Sometimes God shakes relationships because they were built on codependency, not covenant. Sometimes he shakes careers because they were driven by ego, not calling. Sometimes he shakes your confidence in what you've achieved so you'll place your trust in who he is, not in what you can do. This shaking feels uncomfortable, it feels unsettling, but it's sacred because it exposes what needs to go. It reveals what was weak. It shines a light on what you were relying on more than him. And until those things are addressed, you can't fully step into the kind of destiny that lasts. There are prayers you've prayed that initiated a shaking. You asked to be used by God, to walk in purpose, to be set apart. And he answered by disrupting everything that was keeping you from becoming that person. And the process is painful because it touches every false sense of security. It confronts the things you leaned on to feel stable. But those things were temporary. They were seasonal. And God's plan for your life is eternal. He doesn't want you to carry eternal purpose on temporary structures. So he tears down, he disrupts, he interrupts your rhythm so he can establish his. In the shaking, there's an invitation, not just to let go of what's falling, but to dig deeper into what remains. Because not everything is being removed. Some things are being revealed. The strength you didn't know you had begins to rise. The discernment you've been praying for becomes clearer. The clarity you've longed for emerges not in calm, but in chaos. Because it's in the storm that you learn what's truly anchored. You don't know what's solid until everything else is shaken. What God is building in you can't be rushed. It's not a quick fix. It's not about appearances. It's about endurance. It's about legacy. It's about carrying something that doesn't crumble under pressure. So he tests the foundation before he adds to it. He checks the soil of your soul before he plants the seed. He watches how you handle loss, how you respond to disappointment, how you walk through silence. Not because he's grading you, but because he's growing you. And sometimes growth requires a storm. You're not being punished, you're being positioned to release what's shallow. Positioned to confront what's counterfeit. Positioned to discover that your strength was never in what you had, but in who he is. The shaking is not your end, it's your beginning. It's where illusions fall away. It's where clarity is born. It's where dependency shifts from people and systems and titles to the one who never changes. It takes spiritual maturity to recognize that what looks like chaos might actually be construction. That the breaking is part of the building. It's part of the building. That what's falling apart is doing so because it was never meant to hold what's coming. God is not trying to break you. He's breaking what's not like him. He's removing what you settled for. He's refining what you tolerated. He's exposing what you've hidden. And all of it is love. You prayed to be aligned. You asked for purpose. You declared surrender. And he answered with a shaking, not to destroy, but to deliver. Because when the shaking is over, what remains will be unshakable. What stands will be solid. What grows will be lasting. And you'll look back not with regret, but with reverence, realizing that what felt like loss was actually the laying of a new foundation. One that could hold the promise without cracking. One that could sustain the vision without compromise. One that could carry the future you without collapsing under the weight of it. You've been waiting for the breakthrough. You've been asking, seeking, knocking, believing that what you saw in your spirit would soon manifest in your life. But what if this waiting season was never just about getting to the breakthrough? What if instead it was about who you would become while waiting for it? What if the delay wasn't a detour, but a divine strategy to shape you into the person who could carry the breakthrough with grace, maturity, and authority? The thing about breakthroughs is that they aren't just moments of sudden change. They are moments that test what's been cultivated in private. A breakthrough exposes what's inside. It pulls back the curtain on the work that's been done behind the scenes. You can't just stumble into breakthrough. You have to be prepared for what comes after it, because the weight of answered prayers is real. The responsibility of walking in the fulfillment of a promise is not for the fragile or the faint-hearted. That's why God takes time in the becoming. That's why he takes you through process before he positions you for purpose. There is a becoming that happens in the mundane, in the routines. In the days when no one sees your consistency, your sacrifice, your tears, that's where character is forged. That's where trust is developed. That's where God watches how you respond when it's not glamorous. Do you still worship when there's no reward? Do you still obey when it doesn't make sense? Do you still show up with excellence when the stage is empty? These are the questions that matter in the realm of purpose, because your becoming is not just about being gifted. It's about being grounded. God doesn't just want you to have the breakthrough. He wants the breakthrough to have you. He wants it to be more than a moment. He wants it to be a testimony. And testimonies are built on process. They're born out of the tension between what you believe and what you experience. And in that tension, you either compromise your identity or you grow into it. God is inviting you to grow into it, to lean into the discomfort, to trust the slow burn, to believe that what He's doing in you matters just as much as what He's doing for you. The becoming is not a passive thing. It's active. It's intentional. It's you choosing to forgive when bitterness feels easier. It's you choosing to love when self-protection wants to take over. It's you speaking truth over yourself when insecurity tries to mute your voice. These are the daily decisions that shape the vessel, because when God pours out favor, He doesn't want it to crush you. He wants it to flow through you. He wants your character to match your calling. He wants your private life to have the same weight as your public presence. And that only happens when you allow Him to develop you in the becoming. You are being shaped into someone who doesn't just handle the breakthrough, but honors it. Someone who doesn't forget where they came from when doors start opening. Someone who still chooses humility over hype. Someone who knows that power without purity is dangerous. That influence without intimacy with God is hollow. And that success without surrender is not success at all. God is not just preparing circumstances. He's preparing you. Because what's coming is too important to be handled carelessly. In your becoming, you'll have moments of doubt. You'll wonder if it's really worth it, if the pain is too great, if the process is too long. But what God is building in you is eternal. He is not just answering your prayer. He is enlarging your soul. He is giving you the kind of strength that doesn't bend under pressure, the kind of wisdom that can be taught in a classroom, the kind of vision that sees beyond temporary hardship and recognizes the beauty of the long game. You're not just going to step into a breakthrough. You're going to walk in it with authority, with clarity, with peace, because you've allowed yourself to be formed, because you didn't despise the process, because you chose to stay faithful when it was hard, because you learned how to trust when it was quiet. That's the power of becoming. It equips you not just to reach the promise, but to thrive inside of it. So don't rush this. Don't rush this. Don't curse the waiting. Don't minimize the value of your obedience just because you don't see immediate results. Every year you give God in secret is planting seeds for a harvest you'll one day walk in. Every moment you choose to stay when it would be easier to quit is shaping the future version of you who stands strong in the face of pressure. You are not wasting time. You are not wasting time. You are investing in your future. And when the breakthrough does come, you won't be shocked by it. You'll be ready. You'll carry it with grace. You'll protect it with wisdom. And you'll know it didn't just happen by chance. It was birthed through the slow, holy process of becoming. So hold your head up. Stay rooted. Keep becoming. Because the breakthrough isn't just coming for you. It's coming through you.